Hey YouTube, welcome back to Tinker with Tools. Over the last couple of weeks, I've picked up a few new compact drills, so I wanted to go ahead and get all that I have together. So today we are going to be testing 9 compact drills, and so let's go ahead and see which one comes out on top on Tinker with Tools. In the world of tools, and certainly here on YouTube, typically the thing that's going to garner the most attention is going to be speed and power. But right behind that is definitely going to be size when it comes to tools. Previously, if you wanted compact tools, you had to go with something like this, a 12-volt option, this being the M12 from Milwaukee. For the most part, if you're going to ask someone if they'd rather be on a 12-volt platform or an 18 to say 24-volt, they're probably going to choose the 18 to 24-volt if they want to stay on a single platform. And I think the drill world has started to listen, because over the last couple of years, the landscape for the 18 to 24 volt compact drill has certainly exploded, and now pretty much every major company offers a compact option. They're starting to get pretty close to the 12 volts in size while still delivering a bit of a bump in power over those 12 volt options. Now here on the table today, we are mostly going to be talking about drill drivers. I do have 2 hammer drill variants, but with almost all of these, there is a drill driver variant and a hammer drill variant, so I'll be sure to kind of show you what are the differences between those. But first, let me kind of introduce you to the different tools we're going to be talking about today. Now, first up, one of my most recent purchases is this from Bosch. This is the new 800C, and they do offer this in both a hammer drill, which is what I have here, and a drill driver variant. The drill driver variant has the same power and specs for the most part, but is about a half an inch shorter. Now, this is the tallest or longest drill that we're going to be talking about today, but it also has a couple of specs that not all the other drills have, so I'll be sure to point those out along the way. Now, earlier in the week, I had a video about these 2 DeWalt drills. These are the newest atomic drills with the atomic drill driver, the DC794, and the atomic hammer drill, the 799. The drill driver is definitely one of the smaller ones that we're going to feature today, but power-wise, it just definitely does not deliver the same level of performance as some of the top competitors here. That's where the hammer drill version comes in, because this one has 552 unit watts out, and coincidentally enough, it has very identical spec to the DeWalt DCD100, which is the 100th anniversary drill. Now, luckily, because in the UK they don't use unit watts out, we can find that this one actually has roughly 600 inch-pounds of torque, so that actually puts it right up at the top of the other tools. But we're going to see if the torque does make up for some of the deficiency in speed in the testing. All right, next up with Flex, we did see last year the release of their new compact tools, and for Flex, these were a big step in the right direction in terms of reduction of size. They did get a lot smaller than their previous mid-tier offering. They still do boast the best-in-class torque figure. Now, the downside to the Flex obviously is going to be weight, both with its 24-volt battery being one of the bigger batteries out here, and then just the fact that the tools themselves are typically a little bit on the heavier side. With enough power and performance, I think it could make up for that, so we'll have to see how this one does. Next up from Makita is going to be the subcompact. Now here today I've got the drill driver. They also do have a hammer drill variant that's a little bit longer, but other than that, they feature pretty much the same specs. A lot of you have mentioned in the comments that you want me to pick up this tool. It just doesn't seem to offer really modern performance, and so it just didn't ever really appeal to me. All right, and then next up, I've got 2 different options from Metabo HPT. First is going to be their older kind of subcompact rival to what you've seen from some of these other companies. Honestly, it's a very compact, lightweight tool, one of the smaller ones that we have here. It is a little bit longer than some of the shorter tools, and overall, it has some decent qualities, but when you start to use it, the performance just kind of doesn't meet what you expect out of it. Now, also from Metabo HPT, this came out last year, and I absolutely love this drill. It is one of the more impressive ones here. So even though it is a little bit bigger, I do think that it offers a lot. Now, one of the nice things about this is the hammer drill is the exact same size as this tool. So while the drill driver is not one of the shorter ones, the hammer drill is absolutely one of the shorter ones. Now, I've got it sitting here on a 5 amp hour battery, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because it is a Jekyll and Hyde tool when it comes to the performance on a 2 amp hour battery versus the multi-volt battery, but we'll be sure to mention that in the testing. Now, certainly one of the most standout tools in this class is going to be the new Milwaukee compact drill driver. This is the shortest drill that we're going to be testing today, and it is absolutely tiny. Now, another item of note is, although this is the shortest drill driver, it is also the shortest hammer drill, because the hammer drill only grows by 0.1 inches over this drill driver. All right, now last but definitely not least is going to be the rigid subcompact. This is their 2nd generation of subcompact, and although it is not the shortest tool at 6.1 inches, it actually does have some of the lighter weight, but when used with the right battery, which we'll talk about in the performance testing, it actually has decently good performance on this tool, and certainly good enough to kind of be in consideration for you, especially when you can get it on a really good deal. Now, inevitably, I'm not going to own every drill that is out there. One notable exclusion that I just didn't decide to go out and get for the testing was going to be the compact Ryobi HP. It is a little bit on the lower side of power, and it is certainly not one of the smaller drills here. If I've left any other compact drill drivers or compact hammer drills out, please let me know down in the comments. I'd be sure to consider them in future videos. All right, so for the testing categories, there are a number of different categories, and because of that, I'm going to try and move through them pretty quickly. But if you have any questions that I don't answer in the video, let me know down in the comments below. Now, in terms of the size of the drills, I will just kind of point out a couple of the ones that stand out as being overall pretty compact. The Milwaukee Compact M18, it's both short and decently compact and narrow. It really just does stand out as one of the smaller options here. Or the Makita drill driver also kind of really stands out as being pretty compact. Last but not least, the DeWalt Atomic 794. One thing you can't knock it for is it is a pretty nice and tidy little drill. Now, moving on to weight, I'm just going to mention a couple of standouts in this. I've kind of already hinted at it, but this Metabo HPT is super lightweight, 1.9 pounds bare tool. It is definitely the lightest. The Makita is also pretty light, and then the Rigid, because of the materials it was used in construction, it certainly is going to be on the lighter side as well. Going to the opposite end of the scale, the one that really just stands out as being quite heavy is going to be the Flex. Now, the Flex is one of the more compact size drills here. The thing that kind of kills it is the build quality on Flex is really substantial, and because of that is going to be the second heaviest drill driver. The hammer drill version is actually the heaviest hammer drill, and that's all this considered without the battery in mind. This 3.5 amp hour stacked lithium that it's sitting on is actually heavier than the 5 amp hour multi-volt battery by about 100 grams. It's actually the same size as the DeWalt 5 amp hour power stack battery. That is the downside of Flex, is certainly the weight, and so it's not worth pointing out here. Now, because these are compact options, I guess I've made the assumption that you might be using them in slightly more cramped quarters, and so because of that, I do think sound is something you should take into consideration with the tool. While none of these are truly terrible in terms of sound, some of them definitely are quieter than the others. The ones that stand out as being quiet are going to be the Makita at 83 decibels, the Rigid at 84, and the Bosch at 85. Definitely the loudest one, without a doubt, is this bigger Metabo HPT. This thing came in at 90 decibels, so that's something that stands out with that Metabo. Now, another thing we did here is to attempt to measure the run out in the drill, or the amount of chuck wobble, if you will. Now, this wasn't super scientific. I don't have a micrometer out or something that's going to truly measure the run out here. But what we did is we took a 12-inch piece of steel rod. We just did run each one of them against a known straight edge so you could kind of see. Now, overall, none of these chucks are terrible. And unless you're just doing a ton of drilling out at distance of 12 inches or trying to drive a screw with a really long bit extension, I don't think it's going to be a bother on any of these tools. But there were a few standouts that just were a cut above the rest. Milwaukee Flex, and then both of the Metabo HPTs, there was just very little movement in the rod. It was very nice and smooth. There were a couple that just had more noticeable movement. The Bosch, the Rigid, and one of the DeWalt's, the DCD 794, all just had a bit more wobble in the rod when we were sitting there testing it. But like I said, none of these were truly terrible. All right, now we're going to go through some different ergonomics categories and just kind of mention some of the high points that we have here. Obviously, this is all very subjective. I always recommend getting your hands on a tool if you're considering buying it, just to see if it's something you like. I did just kind of go through and rank each handle and grip, and overall, no terrible ones were here. The ones that stood out as being kind of the best were the Makita, the Bosch, and then the DeWalt. All were kind of right there at being one of the best ones out there. Now, next up, we're talking about chucks, and obviously the run out of the chuck kind of plays into this, but more so, I'm just talking about how nice it is to use the chuck, how easy it is to tighten it down. Now, looking at the best in class, I would definitely say that two of the best were going to be the Bosch and then also this from the Flex. Both of these chucks were really nice to use, easy to tighten down, they held on to bits well, and certainly were standouts in the chuck department. Now, there are a lot of plastic outer chucks in this category, and for the most part, they're all about the same. I don't necessarily have any issues with them being able to hold on to bits. I do just most of the time prefer a metal outer chuck. Now, the one exception to the metal outer chuck is going to be that of Milwaukee. This is pretty much the only bad thing you are going to hear me say about the Milwaukee drill today, and that is this chuck is just slippery. I have had zero performance issues for it. It held the bits well, but compared to what you get on some of their other fuel lines of tools, this chuck is just slippery, and because of that, it is decently hard, in my opinion, to get it ratcheted down compared to some of the other much better chucks out here, to the point that I've considered swapping the chuck on this for an aftermarket one. If you have an opinion on this, let me know, because it really just stands out as the one weak point, in my opinion, to this tool. I evaluated the controls on the drill, and overall, DeWalt, Makita, and Milwaukee kind of stood out as my favorites. There were some, like this bigger Metabo HPT drill, where there just was not enough resistance on the forward and reverse selector, from my opinion. The flex kind of stood out. The clutch selector ring on this one is actually probably one of my favorites, maybe just after that of the Bosch. What happens on a lot of these tools is because of how compact they are, you can actually find yourself hitting this lower part where either the light is or just the bump out above the trigger when you go to adjust the clutch ring. For whatever reason, the Flex have kind of figured it out, and it doesn't seem to be as big of an issue there. Now, in terms of build quality, obviously long-term durability is going to be something that has to be evaluated after using these tools for quite some time, but I will tell you that right off the bat, kind of initial build quality feel is going to be to the Bosch and the Flex. They are very solid, robust tools, and that's not to sit here and say that some of the others are not that way, but they definitely feel more substantial and just have an overall higher quality feel to them. I know that's very subjective, so I would encourage you to kind of go out and assess it for yourself. The one that definitely does feel a little bit weaker in terms of build quality is going to be that of the Rigid. Some of the materials used do feel a little bit lighter duty, in my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but just given how light it is for its size, it just does feel less substantial. All right, next up, we're going to talk about trigger. Hands down for me, the best trigger, and kind of a surprise for me, was going to be on both of the DeWalt. They just had a really easy and predictable trigger that, although it has a little bit more resistance than maybe something really light like the Metabo HPT, it just had really good predictable control of when it was going to start up. The trigger on the Rigid kind of bothers me. No matter how quick you press the trigger, it just has a slow ramp up. For not kind of camming out initial driving of screws, that can be nice, but ultimately I would rather have the control with a really good predictable trigger than have the tool actually do something like that for me. All right, now last, just a couple of notes on safety. The Bosch is going to be the safety winner with active kickback control on the tool. You can easily turn it on or off down on the base of the tool. In my opinion, this is the best implementation of a safety control that can be turned on or off as you see fit, and it works really well. It will simply stop the tool. Although it is very sensitive and will kick in, because you can turn it off, I'm okay with the sensitivity on it. The Metabo HPT, the newer, bigger one, does have their RFC technology on it, which is essentially kickback control. It's not going to activate at the turn like you're seeing with some of the bigger drills, for example, or even the newer Metabo HPT big drills that do kind of react very quickly and simply. But I will say, when it does bind up on a bit on the wood, it does seem to cut out. So although it's not maybe kickback control like what we see with the Bosch, it does appear to have some safety controls in it. I did attempt to kind of measure the clutch and how well it works on all these tools. To do this, they each drove 3 2-inch screws, and what we were doing is we set all of them to speed 2, clutch position 2, and we were going to assess both the sensitivity, and then the other one was how consistent the clutch is at driving screws. Now, the most sensitive clutch was by far the Flex. It was consistently right around the 1.5 inch mark, so it does seem like you could do some decently sensitive work with this and have a clutch that will kick in. Now, next up was going to be the Milwaukee, the Metabo HPT, the lighter duty one, and the Makita. All were right around 1.25 inches for most of their screws. Now, the most consistent clutches, first and foremost, was going to be the Makita, and then the Metabo HPT, the older one. Those were just dead consistent, probably within about 1/8 of an inch total, maybe even 1/16 of their 3 screws were all at the same height. The Flex was a little bit less consistent, but still very consistent, and so for that reason, it kind of just comes in a tick behind. Now, in terms of least sensitive, I do feel it's worth pointing out the Rigid drove all 3 screws in flush with the material, so full 2 inches in, did it on every screw. I even drove a couple of additional screws just to double check. Definitely not a sensitive clutch on the Rigid, in my opinion. So that takes us now to the performance testing. So I did run through some common drill task and driving task for all of these tools. The driving tests that I did were actually just a couple of common size fasteners, pushing these tools more than what most people are going to do with a compact drill. But the main reason there is just to start to see the separation in terms of what these tools can do power wise. That's not to say that that is what you should ideally doing with these tools. And then on the drilling task, I did a couple of different sizes of auger and spade bits just to kind of gauge what their capacity was and what they were comfortable doing. Now the top drilling performance was going to be the Milwaukee, came out on top and just performed really well. Next up was going to be the Bosch 800C, and then the Flex as well were right there kind of neck and neck, but certainly the Milwaukee was a standout. Now a performance note that I'm going to mention here, I ran this Metabo HPT on a 2 amp hour battery first, and the performance was not terrible. It was definitely not the worst one here. It was coming up with a time on the drilling task of 11 seconds. But when you put it on the 5 amp hour battery, it actually blew away the competition here and moved into the lead. So that is a tool that certainly benefits from that more performant battery. The Rigid is also one that on a 2 amp hour battery is pretty uninspiring, but you put it on the 4 amp hour max output, which is not a huge battery. It's still decent in size. That one really performed well on that max output and was just kind of right outside the top leaders. The top driving task, now we had the Flex with the best time. The Milwaukee was the second best time. Bosch came in third. And if I ran that Metabo HPT on the, like I said, the 5 amp hour battery, it edged out the Flex and the Milwaukee just barely for the top spot. But obviously if you run it down on that 2 amp hour, it definitely did not fare as well. The overall top three for top performance drilling and driving combined were going to be the Milwaukee, the Flex, and the Bosch. Now the bottom performance here, without a doubt, was going to be this Metabo HPT DDX. Pretty atrocious performance. I'll give you an indication. If I just take its driving times, it actually finished in bottom without even considering its drilling times. Now, something I want to evaluate here is going to be the battery platform. And what I'm talking about here is just the overall number of options you have to run these tools and how advanced the different batteries are that they do offer. The top battery platform for me was without a doubt DeWalt, and here's kind of the rationale behind it. They have affordable batteries. They've recently unveiled a 3 amp hour bone stock XR battery that can be purchased for as little as $39. Their purpose being to kind of combat counterfeit batteries that people are finding or turning to that can be both damaging to the tools or even dangerous to have in your house. Then they also do just have decent overall XR batteries like the 5 amp hour that you could run this on. They have 21700 cell batteries that offer a little bit of a bump in performance if you're going to those batteries. Then at the very top, and I don't necessarily recommend it with these compact tools, but they have FlexVolt batteries, which are just these big old beasts of batteries. And then they take that a step further and go with the next kind of generation of battery technology, for them being the Power Stack. The real ace in the hole that they have in this compact tool size is going to be that 1.7 amp hour Power Stack, which is going to give you similar performance to that of a 5 amp hour XR battery, but in a significantly smaller size. And so between having a variety of affordable and more expensive options, having battery sizes of all different sizes, having the more advanced battery technologies, and just kind of seeing that continual improvement, that is something that really set DeWalt apart from the top. Now, next up, I would probably put Milwaukee and Flex, because once again, they do have a number of different power levels in their batteries. Bosch has really solid batteries. They have batteries with 21700 cells, and for the most part, for their size, their 4 amp hour battery is smaller than the 3.0 high output from Milwaukee, for example, but it's a 4 amp hour battery. I just want to see Bosch then take that next step with even more advanced battery technology, but overall their batteries are pretty solid. The one that's most intriguing to me, and I know the battery category is getting long here, is that Rigid has actually announced an EXP battery with tabless cells, and so to be able to see later on this year a 4 amp hour tabless battery on this tool, that's where I'm starting to get intrigued with them, and certainly something of note. All right, so now that takes us to the very end. It's time to announce kind of our overall winners, or the ones that would carry the Tinker with Tools recommendation. And first and foremost, I really do think that the Milwaukee just does stand out. It is the most compact. It's not the lightest, but it's definitely the most compact drill that is here. You can put it on a powerful yet decently compact battery in the 3 amp hour. There really is nothing to hate about this drill other than maybe, like I said, that chuck. It's something that I can live with because the rest of the tool is just that good. Now, the one that would probably get the recommendation if it were not for its overall weight is going to be the Flex. Overall, if weight is not a concern for you, the Flex is a really nice drill to use. It has good power, it has good performance, it's got decent modern batteries that you can go. You can get a lifetime warranty on it. So aside from the weight, and that's really where the Milwaukee gets the nod, this is a really solid option as well, and especially at $99 for a kit. Although it's not the smallest, the Bosch really kind of surprised me here. If I had the 6.4-inch drill driver version, I might even be tempted to sit here and say this is on the level with the Flex, and you're getting some awesome premium features on this tool, and the performance was right up there with the best of these, and so that is something that definitely stands out with this drill. So there you have it. That is our rundown of these compact tools. Go ahead and let me know what you think of this video in the comments down below. I'd love to hear which of these you would end up with, and if I forgot any of them, please leave those down in the comments. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and make sure to turn on notifications so you get notified whenever I put out a new video. As always, thank you for all the support, and until next time, I'll catch you on Tinker with Tools.